The courthouse waiting area buzzed with quiet voices, the occasional shuffle of papers breaking the stillness. Emma shifted on the hard wooden bench, one hand resting protectively over her belly. At 7 months pregnant, exhaustion clung to her like a second skin. Her swollen feet ached from the long day ahead, but her posture remained firm. She wasn't here for herself. She was here for family. Her younger sister, Madison, was scheduled to appear before a judge that morning, facing a petty theft charge she swore was a misunderstanding. Emma believed her, not just out of sisterly loyalty, but because she had spent her entire life fighting for what was right. She'd organized food drives, helped struggling families cover their rent, and led community forums that held local leaders accountable. If someone needed her, she showed up. No questions asked, no excuses given. As she sat, scanning the room, a janitor hurried past, arms overloaded with a heavy box of legal files. The inevitable happened. The box slipped. Papers exploded across the floor in a chaotic mess. People nearby either ignored it completely or acted as though it wasn't their problem. Emma hesitated for only a second before pushing herself to her feet. "You need a hand?" she asked, already reaching down despite the weight of her growing belly. The janitor, clearly embarrassed, shook her head. "Oh, ma'am, please don't. I got it." Emma brushed off the concern. "It's fine, I've got it." Her movements weren't fast, but they were deliberate. One by one, she gathered the scattered documents, not caring that her back protested with every bend. The janitor muttered her thanks, her cheeks flushed with gratitude. But Emma's small act of kindness hadn't gone unnoticed. Behind the glass door of his office, Judge Harold Grayson peered out, his sharp eyes narrowing in curiosity. His name carried weight in this courthouse. He was known for his no-nonsense demeanor, his ruthless sentencing, and an unshakable belief that authority should never be questioned. To him, Emma's actions weren't a reflection of character. They were an anomaly, a heavily pregnant woman struggling to pick up someone else's mess. That didn't fit into his narrow, unyielding worldview. The courtroom doors creaked open, signaling the start of Madison's hearing. Emma returned to her seat, her face calm but her mind racing. She had rehearsed what she might say if things went south, but deep down, she hoped she wouldn't need to. Hope was fragile, but it was hers. She wasn't afraid to fight. She just prayed she wouldn't have to. When Madison's case was called, she stood exchanging a quick glance with Emma. The silent message between them was clear. Stay strong. Emma mouthed the words, "You got this," as her sister walked toward the defendant's table. Judge Harold Grayson settled into his chair, adjusting his robe with the authority of a man who thrived on control. He was known for his unforgiving rulings and his cold, unyielding demeanor. As he scanned the courtroom, his eyes landed on Madison, then flicked to Emma. His lips curled into something between a smirk and a sneer. "Another member of the same family in my courtroom," he said, his voice laced with disdain. "Seems like trouble runs in your bloodline." The words hit Emma like a slap. She clenched her hands in her lap, forcing herself to stay quiet. Confronting him head-on wouldn't help Madison. But Grayson wasn't done. His gaze sharpened as he turned fully toward Emma. "You," he said, pointing a rigid finger at her. "Stand up." A ripple of confusion spread through the room. Emma hesitated, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "Excuse me?" she asked, keeping her voice steady, even as her pulse quickened. "If you've got the energy to play the Good Samaritan in my courthouse," Grayson said, his tone dripping with mockery, "then you've got the energy for a little exercise. 50 push-ups. Right here. Right now. Let's see just how strong you really are." The room fell silent. A sharp gasp escaped Madison's lips. People exchanged stunned glances, unsure if they had actually witnessed a respected judge demand that a 7-month pregnant woman drop to the floor for push-ups. Emma stared at him in disbelief. Did he really think this was acceptable? Did he care at all that she was carrying a child? "Sir," she began, forcing herself to remain calm. "With all due respect, I can't—" "You will," he cut her off, his voice cold. "Or I'll hold you in contempt. Your choice." The humiliation hit her like a wave. The weight of 100 eyes pressed down on her. Some whispered in hushed tones, their voices blending into an indecipherable hum. Others watched with detached curiosity, indifferent to the injustice unfolding before them. Emma's hands trembled as she slowly lowered herself to the ground. A sharp pressure built in her back as her body adjusted to the movement. Her baby shifted inside her, reacting to the sudden change. She placed her palms against the cold floor, bracing herself. The first push-up was agony. Her arms trembled as she pressed up, her belly making the movement even harder. Sweat formed at her temples. She tried to steady her breathing, but the sheer weight of the moment made it impossible. She pushed through a second, then a third. Pain shot through her lower back. Her vision blurred at the edges. "This is illegal!" Madison's voice rang out, raw with anger. "She's pregnant! You can't do this!" Grayson slammed his gavel so hard the sound cracked through the courtroom like a gunshot. His face twisted in irritation. "One more word out of you, and you'll be facing contempt charges," he snapped. In the back row, a young attorney named Daniel Carter had seen enough. He leaned forward, pulled out his phone, and began recording. Keeping his voice low, he whispered, "Ma'am, you don't have to do this. I'm recording everything. We can fight this." Emma met his gaze, her arms still shaking beneath her weight. She could feel the burn in her muscles, the strain in her body, but something stronger than pain kept her going. "It's not about me," she whispered back, shaking her head. "It's about everyone." She forced herself into another push-up, then another. Her vision blurred as dizziness threatened to take over. Then, the courtroom doors burst open. A tall man in a dark suit strode in, his presence filling the room like a thunderstorm rolling in. Daniel stopped recording. The entire courtroom turned. Emma froze, her arms barely holding her up. Her husband had arrived. The heavy courtroom doors slammed open, the echo cutting through the stunned silence like a gavel strike. A man in a dark suit strode inside, his every step radiating power and purpose. His face was unreadable, but his eyes burned with fury. James Carter, United States Senator, Emma's husband. The energy in the room shifted instantly. People straightened in their seats. The murmurs grew louder. Phones came out. Even Judge Grayson, always so composed, visibly tensed. "What is going on here?" James's voice sliced through the tension, firm and ice cold. His eyes locked onto his wife, still trembling on the courtroom floor. Emma could barely catch her breath. Her arms had given out. She had collapsed onto her elbows, too weak to push up again. Every muscle in her body screamed, but none of it compared to the wave of relief that crashed over her at the sight of him. James's gaze snapped to Grayson. "Who gave you the right to treat my wife like this?" The judge adjusted his robe, his arrogance faltering for the first time. He cleared his throat. "In this court, everyone is equal under the law, Senator." James took a measured step forward. His voice dropped, slow and deliberate. "Equal? You call forcing a pregnant woman to the floor equality?" No answer. The tension in the room thickened. The spectators, some horrified, others too afraid to react, watched as the balance of power shifted. Grayson sat straighter, gripping his gavel as if it were the last thing keeping him in control. "This is my courtroom, Senator Carter. You don't get to intimidate me." James exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Intimidate you?" His voice was quieter now, more dangerous. He stepped closer, lowering himself to Emma's level and reaching out a hand. She took it, her fingers cold against his warmth. He lifted her carefully, steadying her when she swayed. His grip was firm, protective, unshakable. Then he turned back to Grayson. "You violated every ethical and legal boundary imaginable," James said, his tone edged with steel, "and you will be held accountable." The room exploded into whispers. Emma could hear the clicking of phones, the barely contained gasps of those who finally realized the weight of what had just happened. Grayson, still seated, shifted uncomfortably. The confidence he had exuded only moments before was crumbling. He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, James pulled out his phone. He turned slightly away from the judge, pressing a contact and lifting the device to his ear. "It's James Carter. I need you at the courthouse. Now." The courtroom fell silent. Then within minutes, the doors swung open again. This time, it wasn't just one person. Reporters, cameras, recorders. The entire media storm had arrived. The shift in Grayson's demeanor was instant. His face paled, his hands clenched on his desk. He wasn't just dealing with a courtroom full of witnesses anymore. Now the whole country would see this. Emma straightened beside her husband. She wasn't just relieved anymore. She was ready. James turned to the press, his expression unreadable. Then, with a voice that carried through every microphone in the room, he said, "This isn't about jurisdiction. This is about human dignity. This man has abused his power to humiliate others, and it ends today." The clapping started slow. Then it spread. First a few people, then more. Then the entire courtroom. A collective defiance against injustice. A sound louder than any gavel. And Judge Grayson knew it. His grip tightened. His jaw clenched. He had lost control. The thunder of applause filled the courtroom, rolling through the space like a wave. People weren't just clapping. They were standing, cheering, reclaiming their voices. Judge Harold Grayson's face drained of color. His once commanding posture slumped as the realization set in. He had lost control. The same gavel he had slammed down with so much confidence now rested uselessly in his grip. James Carter didn't so much as flinch at the noise. His focus was locked on Grayson, his expression unreadable. "You think this is a joke?" The judge's voice was a fraction of what it had been minutes ago. He still held on to some illusion of power, but it was slipping through his fingers like sand. James turned toward the cameras. His voice, strong and deliberate, carried through every microphone. "This is not a joke," he said. "This is about a man who used his position to degrade, humiliate, and abuse his authority. In his courtroom, he demands respect but gives none in return. That ends today." The flashes from cameras intensified, capturing every second of the moment. The air crackled with anticipation, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. The doors opened once more, and two of James's senior aides strode in, their expressions grim. One of them, a tall man in a gray suit, approached the judge's bench and extended a folder of official documents. "Judge Grayson," he said, his tone firm but controlled, "this is a formal complaint filed with the Judicial Oversight Committee. You will be hearing from them very soon." Grayson's hands curled into fists. "You have no right—" "I have every right," James cut in, not giving him the chance to squirm out of accountability. "You think your position makes you untouchable? That no one will challenge you because you sit on a bench and wear a robe?" His voice hardened. "You abused your power. You humiliated a pregnant woman in a court of law, and now you will answer for it." The murmurs in the room grew louder. Phones were still recording. News was spreading in real time. Grayson glanced toward the courtroom exit, calculating his escape. But before he could make a move, the second aide stepped forward, holding out a crisp white envelope. "This is an official order from the State Judiciary Board. You are being placed under an immediate ethics investigation. Any attempts to interfere will result in further legal action." The weight of those words landed like a hammer. Grayson's face twisted with something between rage and panic. He opened his mouth to protest, but there was nothing left to say. The whole world was watching. With slow, reluctant movements, he sank back into his chair. The power he had wielded over others no longer protected him. A court bailiff, once loyal to the judge, stepped up hesitantly. "Sir," he said, voice careful, "you need to come with us." Silence. Then, with the eyes of the nation upon him, Judge Grayson finally stood up. A chorus of clicks from the cameras followed as he walked out, escorted through the doors he had once ruled behind. It was over. James turned back to Emma, placing a steadying hand on her back. The fight had been won, but exhaustion finally crashed over her. She exhaled a shaky breath, feeling the weight of the entire ordeal settling into her bones. "Come on," James said, voice softer now. "Let's get you out of here." She nodded, but as she looked around the room, she saw something different in the faces of the people watching. They weren't just bystanders anymore. They were witnesses. They were part of something bigger. A spark had been lit. As she and James made their way toward the exit, a woman in the back row, a stranger, someone Emma had never met, stood up. Then another, and another. Applause swelled once again, this time not for a single moment of defiance, but for justice finally taking its course. Emma turned to James, exhaustion in her body, but determination in her eyes. "This isn't over," she murmured. James gave her a knowing look. "No," he said, "it's just beginning." And as they stepped out into the open air, Cameras still rolling, the world still watching, Emma knew they weren't fighting alone anymore. The air outside the courthouse was thick with voices, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing like a summer lightning storm. Emma stepped into the chaos with James by her side, his grip firm on her hand. The weight of what had just happened still sat heavy on her chest, but she refused to let exhaustion win. She straightened her shoulders. They weren't done. Not even close. A reporter pushed forward, microphone outstretched. Senator Carter, do you believe Judge Grayson will face real consequences? James didn't hesitate. He will, and if he doesn't, we'll make sure he does. Another question came flying. Emma, how do you feel after today? Emma met the reporter's gaze, her voice steady despite the ache in her body. This was never just about me. This was about every person who has been silenced, humiliated, or treated unfairly by those in power. She scanned the crowd, making sure her words weren't just for the cameras, but for every person watching, at home or in the crowd, who had ever felt powerless. Today was one step, but the fight isn't over. A murmur ran through the crowd, a ripple of something bigger than just a single case in a single courtroom. Behind her, the courthouse doors swung open again. Judge Grayson was gone, but his absence didn't erase the years of damage he had done. The system that had allowed him to thrive still stood. Emma turned back to James, lowering her voice so only he could hear. We can't stop here. He nodded. We won't. A moment later, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen, jaw tightening as he read the message. He exhaled sharply. What is it? Emma asked. He met her eyes. You were right. Grayson isn't the only one. Emma felt a surge of fire in her chest, stronger than exhaustion, stronger than pain. She had spent years fighting for her community, feeding families, helping strangers, standing up when no one else would. But today had proven something. The world was watching now. A cause without a voice was just a whisper in the wind. But when people stood together, when they refused to be silenced, whispers became thunder. Emma looked out at the crowd, at the reporters, at the people who had cheered inside that courtroom. Some were still there, watching, waiting. She didn't know what came next, but she knew one thing. They weren't done yet. The fight for justice doesn't end here. Too many voices go unheard, and too many abuses of power go unchallenged. But together we can make a difference. If this story moved you, hit the like button to show your support. Share this video to spread awareness. And if you believe in standing up for what's right, subscribe now, because these stories matter, and so does your voice. Let's keep the conversation going. What would you have done in Emma's place? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Justice starts with awareness. Be part of the change.